Everyone believes globalization gave us choice. Here's the unsettling truth. It gave us dependency disguised as abundance. Right now, $438.9 billion worth of goods flows from China to America every year. That's not just trade, that's the supply line for an addiction. Electronics in your pocket, toys under your tree, solar panels on your roof. 80% of the world's solar modules come from one country. One country controls 29% of all global manufacturing. But here's the paradox. China's factories are bleeding. Industrial profits fell 3.3% in 2024. Overcapacity is crushing margins. And when the world's cheapest supplier can't afford to keep the lights on, what happens to the economy built on their rock-bottom prices? The answer will redefine everything you thought you knew about affordable. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. In 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization. This wasn't just a trade agreement. It was the deliberate construction of a global factory floor. The promise was simple. China would manufacture everything cheaper than anyone else could dream of, and Western consumers would reap endless abundance. The mechanism was revolutionary. China combined 3 ingredients no other nation could match at scale: a massive labor force willing to work for wages Western unions would never accept, a government willing to subsidize strategic industries into oblivion, and an economic model where political legitimacy depended on growth at any cost. This wasn't free trade. This was engineered dependency. By 2017, China supplied 21.6% of all U.S. imports, the peak of American reliance on Chinese manufacturing. Factories across the Midwest closed, supply chains consolidated. The logic was inescapable. Why manufacture domestically when you could import the same product for a fraction of the cost? What looked like economic efficiency was actually strategic surrender. America didn't just offshore jobs, it offshored the capacity to make things. And capacity, once lost, doesn't return overnight. Here's what most people don't understand about the cheap goods engine. China's model doesn't work like normal capitalism. In a market economy, unprofitable factories close. Prices rise until supply and demand balance. But in China's state-directed system, factories keep running even when they're bleeding money. Why? Because employment equals stability, and stability equals political survival. The result is overcapacity, a flood of goods priced below production cost, subsidized by state banks that will never demand repayment. China added almost twice as much wind and solar capacity in 2023 as the rest of the world combined. Not because demand justified it, because the growth imperative demanded it. This creates a mirror trap. Western companies see Chinese prices and think, we can't compete. They abandon production. Chinese firms gain market share. Once Western capacity is gone, China controls the entire supply chain, from raw materials to finished product. Look at solar panels. China controls roughly 80% of global production capacity. American and European solar manufacturers couldn't match subsidized Chinese prices. Most went bankrupt. Now, even as the West pivots to green energy, it depends on Chinese factories to build the infrastructure. The trick is this: cheap isn't a price, it's a weapon. And once you're dependent on the weapon, the wielder controls your economy. The pattern has played out before, across industries and decades. Case 1. Shipbuilding, 1980s and 2000s. In 1980, South Korea and Japan dominated global shipbuilding. China had virtually no capacity. By 2010, China controlled over 40% of the market. The method? Massive state subsidies, government-backed loans that never had to be repaid, and prices so low that private shipyards in Korea and Europe couldn't survive. Today, if you need a container ship, you likely buy it from China. Case 2. Rare earth elements, 1990s, 2010s. In the 1990s, the U.S. mined most of the world's rare earth elements, critical for electronics and defense systems. China undercut U.S. prices using subsidized production and lax environmental standards. U.S. mines closed. By 2010, China controlled 97% of global rare earth supply. When China briefly restricted exports in 2010, prices spiked 10x. The world discovered it had no backup. Case 3. Solar panels, 2010-2024. In 2010, American and German companies led solar innovation. Then, China flooded the market. State-backed factories ramped production, selling panels below cost. Western manufacturers screamed dumping and filed trade complaints. It didn't matter. By 2024, 80% of solar module capacity sits in China. The green energy transition now depends on the same supply chain logic that created the fossil fuels dependency it's supposed to replace. Notice the pattern: subsidize, flood, dominate, control. Today, the trick is everywhere and accelerating. China's share of U.S. imports has dropped from 21.6% in 2017 to 13.4% in 2024. Politicians call this decoupling and declare victory. But here's what the numbers hide. The composition of imports matters more than the total. Electronics, toys, footwear, critical components, these categories remain overwhelmingly Chinese. Some supply chains have shifted to Vietnam, Mexico, or India, but even those alternative suppliers often use Chinese components, Chinese machinery, or Chinese financing. The dependence didn't disappear, it just got harder to see. Meanwhile, China's domestic economy is cracking. Industrial profits down 3.3% in 2024, extending years of decline. Overcapacity in solar, batteries, and EVs is creating a glut that's crushing margins globally. Chinese factories are caught in a trap. They must keep producing to maintain employment, but production without profit is a death spiral. Here's the collision course. America's addiction to cheap meets China's inability to keep supplying it. Tariffs are already pushing consumer prices higher. If China's factories sector contracts, not by choice, but by economic collapse, the price shocks will make 2021's supply chain chaos look minor. The real secret is this: we built an economy that requires Chinese production to stay cheap forever. But nothing stays cheap forever. Not when the producer is going broke. Who benefits from this system? Not American workers whose factories closed, not Chinese workers grinding 12-hour shifts in plants losing money, not consumers who'll face sticker shock when the subsidy game ends. The winners are the multinational corporations that profited from arbitrage, buying cheap, selling high, pocketing the spread, and the financial sector that financed the offshore shift, collecting fees on every factory closure and every supply chain reconfiguration. The wealth didn't disappear, it concentrated, and the dependency it created is the insurance policy that keeps it concentrated. So, what should you take away? First, cheap has a hidden cost. Every bargain is a bet that the supply chain holds. That bet is shakier than anyone admits. Second, diversification matters, personally and nationally. If your business depends on a single supplier for critical components, you're not efficient, you're exposed. Third, assets beat promises. Physical capacity, factories, skills, supply chains can't be rebuilt with a policy memo. Once it's gone, it takes decades to return. Fourth, watch the profit margins. When producers lose money year after year, either prices rise or supply collapses. There's no third option. The addiction to cheap isn't a moral failing. It's a structural trap, deliberately built and ruthlessly maintained. But every addiction has a withdrawal phase, and the shakes are starting. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.